Welcome back. You're still with Pimento, and you're watching Perspective with Professor Shang Wei. Talking about these external vulnerabilities, like we say, when you do your report, do you take the worst scenario case or middle?
The way we do any of our report, of course, we first take the baseline, the most likely scenario.
The indicators.
Analyze that well. Then we will take into account any risk that either will make the things better or make things worse. Take that into account. Realistic alternative scenarios, so that all countries can be, aware of alternative scenarios as well.
And you think that reforms per se in the economies of each member countries are the first line of defense for that?
The reforms certainly are for most of our countries are a key element. The improved allocation of resources, allow more productive use of our people here and capital here. So in that sense, it underpins the growth. Whether you have successful reform or not, often matter for whether you get higher or lower growth rates. So
when we talk reforms, okay, the government might come up with a reform, but usually it takes a long time to implement it as well. There's a lot of regulation that have to be adjusted. And
there are many things countries have to do. Some will take longer than others, and some will be harder to do than others. There's a sequence of reform. PRC. China has to do a lot of reforms. Well, right now the government of PRC is focusing on financial sector reforms, including liberalizing interest rates and making banking sector more competitive. They're also looking for a way to promote socio-economic inclusion. So China is a country that has experienced very rapid increase in inequality. So moderating inequality is also an important task of the government.
In this world, we always say it's a global world community now. What is the role of intra-regional financing, for example, in strengthening each other's economy?
Intra-Asia financial and trade integration is very important for all countries in the region. Asia as a whole is a high saving region.
What do you mean high saving region?
Many countries in the region's saving rates, the saving as a share of income tend to be a lot higher than Latin America, a lot higher than many other regions. And yet what we see in the data is that countries tend to recycle their savings, not within the region, but going through US, going through other countries. There's certainly scope for...
There's a potential to actually develop
use better use of savings within the region for the investment of infrastructure and other investment in the country. And having a more open regime towards foreign direct investment, especially foreign direct investment from other countries within the region, can also be helpful to growth.
Is there an example of a successful sort of multilateral sort of financing?
There are many. I can give you individual country level examples and subgroup, regional group level. So at the country level, Singapore, it's been in the news this week, had chosen to have a very, very open regime, both to trade and to foreign investment. China, a fast-growing economic giant, has chosen to be very, very open to both FDI and trade. Trade to GDP ratio, FDI to GDP ratio are very, very high for those kind of economy. I think when Indonesia continue to make improvements on those in these areas, it will also help Indonesia's growth. In terms of country grouping kind of example, ASEAN is actually a very good example of groups of countries that choose to not only liberalize trade among member countries. 2015 is the year of ASEAN Economic Community. But one of the very interesting pattern about ASEAN integration is whenever ASEAN countries decided to liberalize or reduce barriers among themselves, often member countries will quickly choose to also reduce trade barriers open up to even non-member countries. And that's such a very important. That's such a very important. It's very, very helpful. Very, very beneficial.
One of the problems that are faced by many countries in the region is current account deficit. What can one do? Because this is a problem that really needs, like you say, a reform in policies and things like that. Complete change in, for example, manufacturing, export.
Yeah, interestingly, while some countries in the region have current account deficit, others are having current accounts surplus. So developing Asia as a whole actually has a moderate surplus.
Right.
I mean, has had the surplus in the last 2 decades or so. And right now, for the region as a whole, we see current account surplus on the order of about 2.some% of GDP. That means within the region,
in
a lot
total
of capital flows, some deficit of some country are more than offset by surpluses of some other countries. Okay. And what underlines the current accounts is not just competitiveness of trade, but also patterns of capital flows.
Yeah, we'll talk about capital flows after this. I'm interested. Please stay with us. We will be back.